Hello there, and today we're going to be reacting to Extinct Zoos, the most terrifying discoveries made by archaeologists. This was recommended to me by one of the commenters from my More Pause videos, so let's see what this is like.
I'm sure you've all heard the question, what is the scariest animal? I mean, it is one of the greatest icebreakers.
Sharks.
At least in my opinion.
I know sharks don't kill that many people, but they are scary though. Even as a kid swimming in an enclosed pool, I was scared of sharks.
Some of the more common responses to this are things such as snakes, sharks, spiders, hawks, bears, etc.
If you don't know, I really don't
these
like
answers are
spiders.
fair. They all can be quite scary, but really,
I closed my eyes and
statistically,
looked
there's only
away.
one true answer. And no, it's not mosquitoes. Rather, other humans. No
Yeah,
animal
I remember
causes
watching
ourselves
a Ray Mears. People aren't gonna know who Ray Mears is. It's pre-Bear Grylls before he took off. Ray Mears was giving advice Ewan McGregor when he was motorcycling across Africa or whatever. And it's what do you think's the most scariest thing? And Ewan was I don't know, lions. And Ray Mears was no, it's other humans with AK-47s. That is what you should actually be afraid of. Because the animals just want to leave you alone for the most part.
And every year, at least 475,000 people are killed by other humans. And mind you, this is not including war, car crashes,
yeah, I was about to say that doesn't include
or the
war.
transmission of contagious diseases, which would then put the number in the many millions.
Yeah.
And so not only can no other animal compare to this by number.
Oh damn! Look at snakes. Snakes OP. Jeez Louise. There's crocodiles at 1,000. Elephants? Elephants are equal with lions in terms of how many humans they kill. In fairness, they're probably killing a bunch of poachers, so I'm not too unhappy about that one. Jellyfish over at 40? Sharks at 4? Damn! And here I was slandering sharks.
But also not by brutality, because without going into too much detail, I'm sure most of you already know how brutal humans can be.
Yeah, bro, don't look at the crime statistics.
In some ways, I much prefer the present over the past, as back in the day, people could be quite, out of control. And there is no better evidence
There was once a war between Hannibal and the Romans, and Hannibal killed I think it's 1 in 6 adult human males in Rome. In a day? Bro, that is an insane amount of murder. Ridiculous.
Human violence, which was in some cases so grim that it honestly makes horror movies look like sunshine and roses. And a decent place to start is about just the worst time you could have spawned as a human, the Neolithic, also known as the New Stone Age. It's hard to describe
not the
this
worst period
in
to
one word,
spawn in.
but whatever that word is, it's not a good one. And that largely was because of us, with violence and war being the name of the game back then. In fact, the violence was...
Well, no, violence war wasn't the name of the game. Survival was the name of the game. And war was something that followed from the need to survive and gather resources.
so bad that it might have resulted in a drastic drop in population that was severe enough to cause an actual genetic bottleneck. And due to this, you might be unsurprised to hear that we know of literally hundreds of mass burials and sites of brutal violence that all trace back to this period. Yet, like everything, there were
but they also had they knew they had to get rid of the bodies.
More plain, a simple blunt force victim here and there. While
they're not
gonna
dig individual graves.
And one of the most horrifying sites yet was a place known as Herxheim. This archaeological site sits in the southwest of Germany.
I knew it was going to be in Germany. All the stuff that happened in early Europe is there is a lot of brutal history.
It's frankly a place you wonder if it would be best if it was...
Did you ever go to the history museum as a kid, whichever one is in your country or whatever, and then you'd be looking around, oh, here's some helmets, here's some swords, here's some stuff, blah 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 blah. Oh, and here's this skeleton with a side of its head chopped in half by a Dane axe. This is complete tonal shift.
As it contains the remains of a pretty grisly massacre, even by prehistoric standards, and is actually the largest ancient massacre site we know of, with there being at least 1,000 slain individuals.
God damn.
Into a series of pits that surrounded a then.
If this was in the Stone Age period, 1,000 people, that's a lot of people. That's essentially a city for them, right?
Settlement. And based on
I know they didn't have cities, but you know what I mean.
Bodies found, it's been suggested that the dead have been offed by not one, but by a variety of different weapons. Gotta switch it up sometimes. But with stone axes in particular being quite prevalent, causing smashed skulls, broken limbs, and just in general, a whole lot of trauma.
Oh, my dog. Oh, he got WWE'd. Bent over the knee like it's Mortal Kombat.
And let's just say, absolutely no mercy was shown to the victims. as
Nope.
men, women, children, and even newborns were amongst the dead.
You forget how savage like humans can actually be. Like when monkey brain takes over, it shuts down like pain receptors. The people can like bash and bash and bash and bash and bash, even if they're breaking their own bones, which you often do when you punch someone in the face.
Something else that was pretty unusual and grotesque about this place was that in the pits of the deceased, researchers wound up finding victims that belonged not to just one group, but multiple. And these groups, in some cases, came from very different places, being from areas up to 310 kilometers or 500 miles.
Yeah, I don't see that as, I just see that as migratory people. I don't like, it's one of those things where people think that in history there wasn't people traveling all over the world. There always has been, and there always kind of will be, because that's just what people do, and that's how you get the merchant class. We had people, even in the medieval period, go all the way to like the end of Africa and back and stuff like that. So like, I don't find that too surprising.
Miles away. And so this, along with the
It's not like they carried those bodies 500 miles.
The settlement, led to the horrifying notion that Herxheim wasn't some aftermath of a battlefield or just a raid on a village, but rather the center of a murderous cult, which rounded up captives from across great distances before then taking
This is the beginning of Conan the Barbarian.
Or perhaps sacrifice.
The lamentation of the
That alone
women.
should be enough to show the dark side of humanity. But the true nightmare involves what happened to these people after death, as the vast majority of skeletons were in abysmal states, being
Yeah, so like, was it used like some kind of ritual sacrifice thing? I guess that's where this is going. A snake cult.
or cleaved, a sign that the killers had meticulously butchered, dismembered, and in some cases, freaking spit roasted these poor people. And all this might have been done for a feast. As they crossed
Yeah,
the bones,
cannibals?
researchers found numerous signs of biting and gnawing, reflecting cannibalism on a
Yeah, is that by human teeth or is that by like wolf teeth or whatever?
never seen before. And some of the bones were even more gnawed than others, suggesting that in this cult, the killers also had their favorite parts of the body.
Cult is a questionable word in this idea because like, yeah, they have society and what, like maybe basic language. They don't have like a constructed idea of, hey, this is my snake cult, lamentation of the women, Conan the Barbarian, and so on. They don't really have a concept of that, do they? At least my knowledge says they don't. So like, cult is the wrong word. I think they were just that hungry and they're just that crazed. And if they had a tribe that grew up doing this for generations, then to them this is just normal. It's not cult, it's just
So to speak.
life.
And sadly, we don't really need our imagination to imagine what parts those were, as we are quite certain that one of the most prized parts turned out to be the noggin, i.e. the brain.
The
As
juicy
majority of skulls
brains.
were treated in the exact same manner, being that they had been struck along the sagittal line, splitting faces, mandibles, and skull caps.
Yeah, so they split
creating
them open like a
symmetrical
coconut.
halves, with a few also clearly having been skinned as well.
Yeah, hopefully not
And then
alive.
taking the flesh off the heads and extracting the brain contents for a good source of daily fat, this cult would then take the vaults of the skull and transform them into essentially skull cups, from which they
Yeah,
would then
pottery.
leading to another very pleasant
Like
idea
Oda
that
Nobunaga.
victims were feasted upon while their killers drank from their literal skulls. Quite a
Yeah.
horrifying thought. Being eaten while someone uses your skull to quench their thirst. But with all this said, ultimately her
Yeah, but at least if they're using your skull to quench their thirst, that typically means you're dead. Whereas if you're being eaten, therefore that's much more unpleasant. You know, the outcome is obviously the same, but
that demonstrated such behavior. But it definitely holds the crown when it comes to quantity and quality, so you could say. And you really won't find locations more brutal than this one. But you can definitely find acts that are almost as cruel and also very strange. Such as a discovery that was made in 2023, when a team stumbled upon a collection of dismembered body parts. Specifically, a dozen of hands that were
this is going to be in Germany again, isn't it?
unearthed within 3 separate pits. No bodies, just hands.
Oh, so they I was going to say behanded. I guess that's the right word. Behanded them?
Now, admittedly, it wasn't the first time specific bones were found in pits. But
Could
these
those
ones
just be
were
thieves,
located in
though?
a rather odd place, where you wouldn't expect to find such a violent act. And where was that? Well, in front of a courtyard. And whose courtyard? Well, instead of a specific person, it belonged to a culture. In a sense. One that I'm sure you have all heard of, and at some point might have been very interested in, as it belonged to ancient Egyptians.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty... Isn't there still cultures today around the world where if you have someone who's committed enough theft, they take their hands away? I feel this still exists somewhere.
It seems like the
People forget there's still like cannibal monks roaming in like Asia. Like those guys still exist.
guys had a knack for hacking people's hands off, and then stuffing them into pits. Now, we were already aware of their affinity for this, based on certain...
Look at how many there are. Clearly this has got to be for thieves or slaves, or... So you wouldn't do it to slaves because slaves are too valuable. You need them to work, so you'd never do it to slaves. You must do it to thieves or someone like that, because it's a completely asinine punishment. If you take someone's hands away, then they can't work.
hieroglyphs which have been discovered in the past, depicting people clearly collecting hands like some type of game achievement. But this find was the first case of researchers actually seeing the practice carried out in real life. Here's the thing though, severed hands are not exactly new. We've seen them happen in prehistoric cases of violence before. You know, such as where a hand is lost in battle. Yet, this story's a bit strange.
It's funny, when you look at when you go to the museum and you see the ones and they've got like skull punctures through picks, they've had their arms chopped off and stuff like that. You kind of look at it with this modern lens of, they'll be fine. But the chances are, if they've had like a serious leg break where the bone is shattered or something like that, chances are they're just gonna die through infection. So they might live through the battle, but then they're dead like a month or two later.
Than simple violence, if you will. You see, the courtyard was situated right in front of a throne room, which belonged to the Hyksos dynasty, a rather well-known group that actually originated in the Levant and ruled thousands of years ago.
But people often think that Cleopatra was like black or whatever and stuff like that, mostly due to that stupid Netflix series. The chances are she was actually white and she actually had red hair.
Marking them as the first foreign rulers of Egypt, with this site explicitly being over 3,500 years old. And they are well known for having introduced a variety of cultures and new tech to the Egyptians, including, for example, chariots. And I guess taking hands was a part of this too. But they weren't just taken for the sake of taking. No, instead it seems like these severed hands were used as some sort of currency. And I don't know about you.
Give each other a hand takes a whole new meaning. How could it be used for currency? What possible use would they have?
But humans constructing a society where removing hands is rewarded with gold or service isn't necessarily a place I'm trying to time travel to visit for too long, or really at all. And so what archaeologists think happened is that soldiers would sever hands off the living or already dead enemies of their rulers, before making them look nice and pretty and presenting them to the pharaoh or some noble.
Yeah, I could see removing the hands of your enemies, but like they were definitely pitching it as like to their own society.
They would have gotten the bag. There's also the suggestion that severed hands were a bit of a cultural currency too, wherein different rulers and people high up would show off by proving they had more sliced hands than the next guy or girl.
Here's my rotting collection of human hands. Aren't you impressed? I don't get this.
This all makes me wonder how many innocent people ultimately got their hands taken, simply because some soldier or person wanted some extra gold.
There's an element of that, but they would have always gone towards the plebs and like the most unfortunate to do that, because there would have been people who would have been like, hey, I'm a lesser noble, I need to show off in front of these other nobles, can you get me 100 hands? And then, you know, some unscrupulous mercenary would go and get those 100 hands. But mostly this is going to be taken from like enemies and like, you know, other soldiers who have been killed in battle or villages they've raised, stuff like that.
Or perhaps that a pharaoh just wanted to show off.
Did they have war dogs in Egypt? Is that a thing that they had back then?
And so far, a dozen.
Did they give them like the Egyptian hats, like the Egyptian beard?
Hands have been unearthed from this specific site, which, by the way, belonged exactly to 12 individuals who were above the ages of 21 but not elderly, and all but
which makes them
one were likely males, with
which makes them essentially soldiers.
last hand possibly having belonged to a lone woman, which we know based off of finger length ratios. Now,
how accurate is that though? I'd still say they're all probably going to be men.
To be honest, I'm certainly not saying this is the most brutal find we have involving people. Yet, I do think it really shows how strange humans are.
See, look, that's the Egyptian beard I was talking about in the hats.
In a kind of bad way, where removing the body parts of your own species can be seen as a monetary, good, and cool thing. And this all makes me wonder, how did we even go from banging some rocks together to trading numerous body parts for gold? Well, I doubt I, or anyone can tell you all the precise steps involved, but I can tell you about the oldest evidence we have for intentional violence between Homo sapiens.
Look at that blurring. A bit of a nip falling out there.
Real Cain and Abel, if you will. A few years back within Romania, the team was excavating the Pistera Sioclovina cave of South.
How many times did he record pronouncing that?
Where they then stumbled upon a multitude of different fossils and artifacts, specifically consisting of stone tools tracing to the
Is there like a Stone Age like CRPG or RPG out there? I know obviously you got like the Conan games, and you got some like older like survival games. I'm talking like a proper like RPG. I wonder how that would work, because obviously you don't have like normal dialogue or like factions. I'd be interested in it.
Culture, along with several bones belonging to cave bear.
Jeez, look at that cave bear. Even in skeletal form, it looks terrifying.
And now, despite being found in Romania, in Transylvania, this was no vampire's lair. Rather, a person, or persons, who had inhabited it for a while and had seemingly whacked a few animals here and there, which were brought back to be grubbed up. Yet, among the pile of material, the researchers noticed something. One very odd thing, which stuck out like a...
Not gonna be an iPhone.
or should I say, a sore head, as it was actually a large piece of a skull. And it didn't belong to no cave bear, but rather a human. To be exact,
it could have been something the cave bear acquired, you know, from a human.
It seemed to belong to an adult man, which had lived in the area about 33,000 years ago during the Upper Paleolithic. And something else they deduced quite obviously was that this was one banged up skull, as the skull's right side had essentially been cracked like a freaking egg.
Yeah, which kind of sounds like a bear attack to me. Like, when a bear wants you, that bear is gonna get you.
However, the team wasn't really sure what this meant. They couldn't figure out if the damage had been accidental, like maybe it was a clumsy goober who tripped and hit his head, or if the damage came from something like a falling rock.
So at no point did they consider that in the bear cave it might have been the bear.
And so this meant they would need to do some research, which entailed gathering what was essentially...
Like the idea of research. It's like, what is this? They got the Bunsen burner in the background, which isn't being turned on. We got several staff working at some lady putting something in a test tube. What kind of research is this?
Essentially, the Avengers of science, uniting researchers from multiple countries and carrying out a slew of tests and scans on the skull, which all ended up revealing a disturbing truth. Very disturbing. And that is that nothing accidental had happened to this man. He had been straight up killed. Intentionally, obviously. Specifically, they were able to identify not one, but two near identical massive fractures that ran along the right side of the skull. And guess what? The presence of these two fractures was huge news, as their identicalness meant that this man had been hit twice in quick succession. And not just that, but that each hit was done by the exact same object. In other words, there's no way this dude slipped.
Yeah, so they whacked him on top of the head. He must have had a reason to get rid of this dude.
Additionally, while comparing the pathology from the skull to that of those seen in present day, they confirmed that the pattern and nature of the wounds only matched damage seen in violent attacks carried out with blunt force objects.
What kind of idiot do you have to be to use a crowbar like that?
In this case, a bat. And with this, the team had a confident idea on what had happened.
Okay, this is interesting. This is interesting. However, if you really put so many resources to figure out how some dude died 30,000 years ago, I'm not questioning like that's not something worth pursuing. But to combine multiple resources across the world seems a bit intense. Does this matter that much?
For whatever reason, 33,000 years ago, this man was mining his own beeswax. Maybe. When all of a sudden he was struck twice.
You can't like give him this backstory of him being some friggin' angel. They clearly got rid of him for a specific reason.
Another individual holding a bat-like weapon, with the first hit incapacitating him, with the second having ended him, likely via catastrophic brain damage. Additionally, this attack seems to have been quite personal too, as the location of the wound suggests that his killer was facing him head-on while carrying out the deed. And for whatever it's worth, it also appears that the killer was left-handed, given that the fractures occurred on the right side of the skull. And when looking at the age of the remains, it is for now considered the oldest near-conclusive evidence we have for intentional violence among humans, and the first homicide.
As opposed to all the mass graves previous. Why is this?
However, I will mention that this absolutely does not mean that in the first 300,000 years we've existed, there were no other acts of murder or violence.
Yeah, exactly.
In fact, it's guaranteed not to have been. It's rather just the first one we are aware of. But there is actually a close competitor that occurred in Russia around the same time, in what is now known as the Sahir Cave. Yet the dating for this one is a bit less clear.
I've been playing Metal Gear Solid on my stream, and my Russian accent has definitely improved as a result.
The specimens within are not yet 100% confirmed to have been intentional, with them possibly having been accidental. But one interesting thing about human violence is that in some ways it does seem to be a bit like a fashion trend, where it waxes and wanes in popularity. Sometimes it's quote-unquote cooler to massacre, and other times not as much, thankfully. And actually, for a good duration of our existence, large-scale violence did seem to be rarer than frequent, with one hypothesis being that...
And the scale of violence is actually really... It's very different from what you think it is. Because for a lot of us, we think of like World War II as being this like huge event, which obviously it was. But if you go back to like the Roman period, it's the scales of the engagements during the Roman period were just unbelievable in terms of numbers. Like something like, again, I mentioned earlier on, like battle between like Hannibal and like the Romans. There's something like 200,000 men in a single field together. It, like, just imagine that, and then half of them got murdered.
For a chunk of history, the population of humans was too low and too mobile for large conflicts to pop up often. Yet, as humans settled into areas more permanently, developed more complex societies, and swelled in numbers, the opportunity and reward for violence grew exponentially.
Only because you needed more resources, which was counterbalanced by the development of various elements of agriculture. But if you expand that outwards, then there are more people who don't have those agricultural techniques and go in to steal food. It's kind of like how in Africa, do you not think it's strange how we keep building wells there? Well, it's because you actually look into it, all the wells that get built, they last for a period of time. And then the people living there, even when they're taught to maintain the wells, they go up and strip it for parts to then get money from it. So you have this like persistent issue of someone makes agriculture, someone comes in and destroys it, and then it just repeats and repeats and repeats. Somehow we got out of it, mostly thanks to the Romans, in my opinion.
And really, as of now, the oldest evidence for large-scale violence dates to around the same time the permanent settlements became a thing. And the location of this atrocity that I'm referring to was discovered within the valley of the Nile, specifically the Sudanese section. And it really was a doozy for scientists, as within this narrow valley lay the remains of at least 64 near-intact skeletons, and a bunch of fragmented bones, most of which were in poor condition. And when I say condition, I don't mean bad condition from weathering or the passing of time. Rather, these lot have been brutally killed, with every single person having some kind of major injury to their body. And unfortunately, the slain weren't just adults, as the deceased were a range of ages and gender, with the indiscriminate violence even being extended.
That little kid got a scar on his face, poor little guy.
As two child specimens, dubbed JS-14 and JS-13, have been literally headshotted by numerous projectiles, with none of their wounds having healed, meaning they died then.
Gave him the firing squad even like 50,000 years ago.
The thing is, they weren't just headshotted, but rather literally riddled by projectiles.
Yeah, firing squad.
So whoever shot them clearly had no mercy in their heart, and even along the legs of these children was their extensive damage, wherein various projectiles had impacted them and were strong enough to badly damage their femurs, causing large chunks of the femur to literally fly off.
Yeah, so they were like severely beaten then.
Overkill treatment. And in 21 individuals, they even found the remains of actual stone-edged points that pierced their bodies, which would have been unimaginably painful in life, lodging into their bones or slicing straight through flesh into organs and other vital structures.
This is what I was saying, when you go to the museum and you see like the stuff they want you to see, and then you go a little bit further and you see like, yeah, so this is this Viking who got chopped in half by a Dane axe. It's the historical world is like brutal.
The shapes of the points indicated that the attack had been carried out with bows and spears, and at first was believed to have represented a pitched battle between two warring factions. However, after some analysis, including the varying ages and gender, a new conclusion was drawn, that the Jebel Sahaba was the site of not one, but multiple battles, and none against two armed groups. Rather a series of raids and ambushes, and not only on
it's like raising and pillaging them, wasn't it?
In this particular situation, scientists believe that the Nile Valley had been undergoing immense ecological changes, likely drying out, which thus led to a drop in resources and suddenly making it very...
This is exactly what I was saying about agriculture. Someone develops agriculture, and a different group either has it and then loses it, and then so they start raiding other places. Ironically then, killing the agriculture that those people have implemented.
Quote, advantageous for humans to start killing their fellow kind. And to me, this isn't the greatest reflection on our species, where in the event that things get tough, instead of cooperating and trying to come up with a solution, the solution is instead to murder everyone around you.
Yeah, but that's because things like solving like a food crisis isn't something you can get together and fix in a week. A food crisis is solved couple years down the line, because you need time for crops to grow and do crop rotation and stuff like that. And even then, they didn't even know about crop rotation. But like and irrigation and stuff like that. This is why going up and murdering is so much more easier. One, because you decrease the population who's going to need all that food. You take all the food for yourself. You get most of their equipment and like fields that they've built. Maybe you can figure out how to work them. You know, so I'm not justifying mass murder. I'm just kind of saying, you know, I get why they would like opt for that solution.
Children. So let me go ahead and just say this.
It's survival of the fittest.
This, I don't condone this, and I'm sure we can do better, so don't wipe us out. Now, with this all said, while Homo sapiens have produced the most disturbing
not through the nose. Damn.
fossil finds by level of violence, it's definitely an issue not limited to our species. Rather, it's a problem for our overall genus, Homo, and thus even the species that are known.
No, it's native to all all animals, full stop. Like hyenas, lions, whatever, they'll all fight and kill one another for territory and stuff like that.
With us, have been responsible for their own horrific act or two. This list isn't short either. Yet, what I think takes the cake for the most deranged discovery regarding non-sapient humans has to be something called Atapuerca. This forsaken location is situated in the Burgos province of Spain, and is by far the oldest case I've talked about, dating all the way back to 850,000 years ago, during the early Pleistocene. However, despite it being one location, it's really multiple sites within one massive area. And through different excavation, 9 different areas have been explored, each yielding vastly different finds from multiple periods. But one of the more memorable ones is a natural chimney of sorts that has accumulated the largest deposit of early hominins that we know of, with the inside of it containing over 5,500 skeletons. And get this, they didn't even all belong to the same humans.
Does he have to blur their asses out? Is that how bad YouTube is?
Some belong to Homo heidelbergensis, others to Neanderthals, and some possibly to Denisovans, with the age also ranging greatly.
Okay, I was wrong earlier then. They were like mixed homos about then.
Them being from 350,000 to 800,000 years old. And along with the diversity in species, this site also had variance in terms of what it revealed about our past, as some of the deceased had certain health conditions, like craniosynostosis.
Oh damn! So
While
interesting.
Others were evidently killed by their fellow humans via blunt force trauma, and some simply seem to have died from old age. Now, what we aren't sure is if this chimney full of bones was a natural occurrence, like for example, with water having swept over the area.
Yeah, that's a big thing for a lot of archaeological stuff, is because there's been so much change and so much movement and flooding and stuff like that. Stuff just gets moved, and it can really throw off the accuracy of, we found these across multiple sites. They can also just come from a single site sometimes, and it's just been moved over time.
Carrying all these bones into this location, or if it was some sort of burial practice.
Having a natural chimney kind of makes it sound like they all got swept there, I'm not gonna lie.
Regardless, this isn't what we are here for, as another area of Atapuerca, dubbed Trinchera Dolina, is in some ways more important and definitely more heinous. Now, this wasn't some narrow chimney, rather a massive cavern that first started to be excavated back in the early 1980s. Interestingly, there are multiple different
I think it's cool that we're still finding stuff today, and you can actually still work as an archaeologist. Unlike most of other stuff where it feels like everything's already been discovered.
Levels to this place, each one with a different sediment that represents a different time period. And thus far, there are 11 different levels which are dubbed TDs. Now, most of the TDs are actually rather tame.
That 20 meters deep, damn.
You might find a tool on one level, some animal bones on the other, etc, etc. You get the picture. However, TD6 was bat poop crazy, as here the remains belonging to at least 11 different hominins have been found. 11 different hominins that were butchered. Not exactly new news, but here's the thing. More
Is that carving in the
of the
bone?
lot had clear signs of having been cannibalized, with bones showing cut marks akin to how hunters butcher animals, with observations also showing that they were scraped, meaning whoever ate them wanted to get every last nook and
Gotta fill the stew, guys.
Up it one more time. Because this wasn't a simple cannibalistic massacre, rather one aimed at a very specific type of person. Children. Yes, among the dead, not a single adult human was found. Instead, all were either infants, or at the oldest, teenagers.
I wonder if that's because, childbirth back then obviously was very mixed. They'd be having a baby as often as they could, essentially. But there was also a period of where if they ran out of food, they just couldn't keep the children around because they require a lot more care and attention. So maybe this is the reason where they just couldn't do it, so they ended up killing their own. And because they were also starving, they then ate them? Is that what happened?
With more than half clearly being under 10 years old. Sickening. And if you didn't think it could get any worse, then I'm sorry.
God, I can't see a goddamn thing about Pedro Pascal turning up, can I?
As the scientists ended up considering this nutritional cannibalism. In other words, the killers viewed these people as just wild animals and flesh.
Well, they weren't really giving them as pets. You don't really raise children as pets. So I honestly think it was more to do with like starvation.
Like they would a deer. Additionally, it is believed that youngsters were targeted as opposed to adults because they would have been less capable of defending themselves. It would be an effective way for the hostile attackers to limit the growth capabilities of other groups. Nasty business. The part that really gets me though is that an analysis on the area and its surroundings that compared the rate of human bones to other animal ones suggested that during this region, 850,000 years ago, things were going just fine. There was no climate crisis, no disease going around, and in other words, these people didn't have to be cannibals. They just chose to. Not to mention that during the act, they even decapitated one of the young specimens, likely while they were still alive. And for now, this is considered the oldest evidence, by good margin, of cannibalism in the Homo genus, setting such a nice tone for the future, doesn't it? Plus, given its nature, it's the first case of cannibalism targeted at younger people.
I like how they always show the Stone Age people as if they're just walking around constantly butt naked. Bro, they're like eating meat there. They've got animal bones. They'd have taken fur. Do you know what I mean? Because it's cold out.
As well. And while we know the rough ages of the slain, the case remains unsolved in one very important area, the species, as there is disagreement on what Homo these victims were. The candidates proposed so far have been Homo erectus, Homo heidelbergensis, or the Homo antecessor, 3 different species known to have lived in Europe at the time. And because there was many shared similarities between these different species,
imagine the eyebrows on that middle one.
and given just the poor condition of the butchered bodies, it's been hard for scientists to sort out which ones they were explicitly. But this mystery is not the point of the story here, just that our genus is a bit messed up. And science actually kind of supports this as well, as a study in over 1,000 different species found that primates, which is what we are, have much higher rates of interspecific violence than most other mammals do.
Oh, that's mostly because a lot of primates operate in like an actual hierarchical society, so it makes sense.
In this circle, where red means bad stuff, you can see that we are definitely on the naughty list. Although, I will say that I was pretty surprised to find that the most bloody of all mammals are really meerkats.
Really? Why? What, do they kill their own? Do they have like pitched battles?
Not human.
Do they have their own archaeology team?
But that's perhaps another story. One that I might talk about on my other channel.
Oh, okay.
So if you're not subscribed to that, go do that now. Humans, given our intelligence and, creativity, have the ability to be much more scary and sinister than meerkats. In other words, if I get caught by something trying to kill me, I really hope it's not a person, because we can come up with some...
I wonder how many meerkats it would take to bring down a human.
You know this.
He's like, do you ever had social media memes like, can 100 guys take down a gorilla? I was like, I'm fairly certain they could since we took down mammoths, but how many meerkats can take down a human?
But unfortunately, ancient humans also demonstrate this very well. And perhaps no other place shows it like Schönig Kilianstetten. Doesn't exactly roll off the tongue well. Well, at least on my tongue.
Vinland?
And nor did it on the eyes, as it was here that an unnecessarily brutal act was carried out. Fun fact, this location is actually not far from the major city of Frankfurt in Germany.
Oh, it's
But
Germany again.
In this case, dates back to 7,000 years ago, making it just one of the over 200 known sites worldwide of mass violence, hailing from the Neolithic. Once again, highlighting the viciousness of this age. And at a first glance, it doesn't seem so special, as it was much smaller than, say, Herxheim, only consisting of one large V-shaped pit wherein lay at least 12 different children, 1 teenager, and 13 adults, who had all either been whacked on the head or skewered with projectiles, which was unfortunately pretty standard.
I wonder how that happens. Like, are they actually having a fight, or are they just like pillaging and then they rounding them up and then killing them?
However, what was really strange here, and not seen anywhere else, was that half of the bodies had the same peculiar pathology, smashed tibias. In other words,
Yeah, so they stopped them from running away.
their shin bones demolished. Pretty unusual. I mean, literally one of a kind. And it was only seen in some of the individuals. But remember, they already had lethal wounds. All of them. So, what does this all mean? Well, according to the team that excavated the bones, it points to a dark hallmark of humanity: mutilation and torture. All the breakage seems to be
Yeah, it's not enough just to kill them.
But what was really
Gotta
striking
mutilate
is that the
them.
afflicted group were residents of a small Neolithic community. In other words, they weren't some warring adversaries, rather just people living their lives, who were then attacked by a party which decided to not only raid them, but torture them by bashing in their legs.
Kind of like being assaulted by orcs. You know what I mean?
And kill them. Now, it's possible that the attack was done in order to take the resources of this community for the attackers group. Yet,
Yeah, it's
that's what
always
makes
about
the torture part
resources.
a big question, and shows
I don't like, even like back in the ye olden day, people just didn't just walk around murdering people, because there's a lot of kind of good faith that just naturally happens. So like they'd have definitely done it with the intention of taking their resources first, as opposed to, let's go mutilate that group for our snake cult.
perhaps early signs of sadism, which is unfortunately actually surprisingly common in humans, at least based on a few studies. There's also the perhaps weirder but less horrifying idea that the shins were actually broken after death in order to prevent their ghosts from chasing the killers. Odd, but given how odd we are, believable. Yet the one thing that gets me is that, like mentioned, not all the legs have been broken. Plus, even some of the kids had signs of this mutilation, meaning it would seem odd that they didn't make sure that all of the ghosts couldn't run after them. But whatever the case, didn't exactly restore
It's like
my
the
confidence.
kitty ghosts
Yeah,
like Casper
so
chase
I
after
think I'm
them.
gonna go take a walk in nature. Peace. Thanks for watching, and until next time on Extinct Zoo.
Let me know what you think about this one. I'm a little bit mixed. For me, this is a channel that is a little bit like the old school like History Channel, where they try and frame the narrative in like a very dramatic way, when often the real answer is like much more basic than that. I think it's a cool channel. I think I'll probably check out some more videos, but yeah, I'm a bit mixed on like the dramatization of a lot of this. I am quite picky with this sort of stuff when it comes to history, so let me know what you think in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe, and I shall catch you in the next one. Bye bye.